Welcome to part 2 of making an outfit that I feel like I could wear to be a background character in Lord of the Rings, specifically Rivendell. In part 1 of the series, I made what I'm going to call an overdress because, as the name implies, it's going to be worn over a dress. And now today, I'm going to be making some arm cuffs and bracers to go with this. My original plan for this was to make the bracers have the same kind of tree pattern that I did on my overdress, but that took way too long. While I do think that would look very cool, in the interest of saving time, I am going to just make them have kind of a grid pattern like I did on the back of this. I think that'll look perfectly fine. We're going to do the same green stitching, but I'm also going to add a offset line of gold stitching just to give it a little bit more interest. So we're going to make those today. I'm going to try to explain my process of how I'm doing things as I'm going. I think that'll be a little bit easier to understand than me just doing a voiceover of the whole thing. So without further ado, let's get right into it. First thing I'm going to do here is get some measurements, and this is not the easiest thing to do by yourself. Normally if I'm doing things on my body, I typically will wrap myself in saran wrap and do the duct tape method so I can draw on top of it. But since these are mostly just square, I'm gonna just take my measurements and hope for the best on paper. Okay, so we're gonna go about 12.5 inches on my arms. Okay, now that I have my measurements done, I'm gonna start sketching out what I want for my armbands first. I'm not gonna use anything fancy to sketch this out on. I'm gonna use some scrap paper, which will be great because I can use the straight edge of this because I'm just gonna essentially make a large rectangle that'll wrap around my arm. Okay, we're gonna do about 3.5 inches wide. So we'll mark that off. What's wrong with my ruler? Here we go. 3.5 inches wide, and then my arm was a 12-inch diameter, so I am gonna, essentially the way this is gonna close is it's gonna wrap around my arm. Let me come down here. It's gonna wrap around my arm and then lace close like a corset. So instead of adding seam allowance to the edges, I'm gonna just take the seam allowance out of the total length of this. Okay, I don't have quite enough paper to make a 5/8 seam allowance on each side, so we're just gonna do a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that'll be totally fine. Moving on to the bracer, this should be pretty easy also. I want them to be about 6 inches long where I lace them, but about 8 inches overall. So I'm gonna mark off 6 inches and then I'm gonna expand that to 8 inches because what I'm gonna do is gonna make a angled portion at the top and then at the wrist seam. So I'm using the edge of the paper to give myself a straight line so that I can fold my fabric in half and get a good even cut on both sides. So my wrist diameter was 6.5 inches, so this line over here I'm measuring to 3.25 inches. I'm gonna make a mark, and then my forearm was 10.5 inches, so over here I'm gonna make 5.25 mark, and then I will connect those two lines. Is that right? I don't feel like I measured correctly. Let me measure again just to be sure. Okay, now I'm getting 10 inches for my forearm. This is concerning. Do I not know how to measure? To make my angled portion, I'm gonna draw a line connecting the point at my actual wrist diameter to the point that I want it to come to, and then we will just kind of freehand a curve how I want it to be. This is the part I like making about my own patterns, is that I can kind of just do whatever I want to. Then, like my other piece, I'm going to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance to my top and bottom seams, but I'm not going to add anything to the side because I want that to be open enough to be laced like a corset at the end. Okay, yay, easy peasy. Armband, bracer. To help give everything some structure, I'm going to use some fusible interfacing, and what I've seen people do before, and I think is so genius, is that you take your pattern, draw it on your fusible interfacing, cut that out, fuse it to your fabric, and then cut your fabric out. I love that method. I've never done it before because I always forget that I can do that, but it looks like it makes the process so much simpler, so that is what we're going to do here. Okay, great. So we have 2 bracers, 2 armbands. This is going to make things so much easier because in the past I would trace everything out onto my fashion fabric, trace everything out onto my fusible interfacing, cut everything out, have to line up my pieces, sew them all together. This way I can just trace it, cut it on here, iron it to my fabric, and then cut it out. I don't have to trace it on my fabric that I'm using, you know, for the outer layer. I still will have to trace one more pattern piece on my layer, but that is so much better than tracing all of these things 4 times. Okay, next part of this is going to be pretty easy. We're just attaching our fusible interfacing to the fabric. So I'm going to start just by going over my fabric real lightly to get out as much of the wrinkles as I can. This fabric, when it came to me, had some pretty harsh wrinkles in it that I have not been able to get out fully, so I just do the best I can to get them out. Once I have that how I like it, I'm just going to put my fusible interfacing on top. Now the fusible interfacing, there's 2 sides to it. There's one that's a little bit shiny, that has the adhesive on it, and then the other side, which is matte and just has the little fibers all over it. We're going to go adhesive side down. The way I like to do this, that I found works best for me, is I will just get a thin kitchen towel, lay it over top. You can see this one's pretty old. And then I have my spray bottle nearby. I will spray it down. Get it pretty damp, not soaking wet. But enough that it'll kind of steam everything in place. So that's probably pretty good there. And then I will go through and press it off. I'll give everything a good once over real quick, and then I'll go back and just slowly move my iron over thing just to make sure that adhesive is really good and set. Okay, easy peasy. And then I will just repeat that for all the rest of my pieces. It is the next day. I ran out of time yesterday to finish working on this, but I got all my interfacing ironed on, and then I went ahead and cut out the second panel that it's going to be the facing of both my armbands and my bracers. So what I'm going to do now is go through and trace all my lines that I'm going to quilt to make my design on there, and then we will start stitching everything together. I'm going to start with the armbands first, since I think these will go a little bit faster than the bracers will. Whenever I did my quilting design on the back of my overdress, I did it in a diamond shape pattern so that it would have a little bit more interest to it than just being regular squares. So I'm going to mimic that same thing on these as well. So you can see here I have my diamonds mapped out. I am gonna have to work kind of quickly on this because I used a marker that fades over time, and it fades rather quickly. So we're gonna go ahead and head over to the sewing machine and just stitch over all these lines with just my regular green thread. Okay, so I got all of my green stitching done. You can see kind of that diamond pattern that I was talking about earlier. And I did the exact same thing on the bracer panels. So I'm super excited. I think this is gonna look really cool. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move on to doing my gold thread. And so I'm gonna basically do the exact same pattern I just did. I'm gonna map it all out first, then stitch it, but I'm gonna do the gold thread. I'm gonna offset it like a 1/2 inch from the green lines I just did. I don't really wanna put them directly in the middle. Number one, I feel like if I mess up and don't get the measurement exactly right, it's gonna be super obvious, but also I think it'll look cooler if it's, you know, not right in the middle. I don't know why. Just in my head, that looks cooler than being, you know, perfectly splitting the difference between the lines. For the lines that I'm marking out here, I am actually gonna use Tailor's chalk for this, just because I have to sew a lot slower with that gold thread. If I sew too fast, it snaps. From what I found out before whenever I was making a gambeson for one of my best friend. So we need something that's not going to disappear on us. So there you can see all my lines mapped out there. I'm gonna go over all of that with my gold thread now. You know what I mean? If I go too fast, my thread breaks. So we need to slow down. And we're gonna redo that line now. I'm like 2 seconds away from considering hand sewing this if I have to rethread my machine one more time, because I think this is the 4th time I'm rethreading it now. Oh my god. What am I doing wrong? I'm now resorting to hand sewing because I cannot deal with my machine at the moment, so this is what we've got. I'm not the best at hand sewing, but I feel like I'm good enough to just do a simple back stitch to get these lines done. If by the time I'm done with this one armband I am completely over it, then maybe I'll try my machine again. But at this time, I'm not having it. I had a little come to Jesus moment. Hand sewing was taking way too long, so I did some troubleshooting, took some deep breaths, figured out my machine. I don't know what exactly fixed it, but I changed my needle, cleaned the whole thing, oiled the machine, and it started working again. The only problem that I'm having now is that every once in a while the thread is like slipping off of one of the top loops. I don't know if that's just because it's a metallic thread and it's basically made of like a really thin plastic foil or like metal-ish foil. I don't really know what material. I don't know. I'm not a professional. I don't make thread. So I don't know what the deal with that is, but if that's all I have to do instead of spending, you know, 20 minutes sewing one tiny line, I'm happy to just keep rethreading it every once in a while. So we're back in business with working with my sewing machine instead of hand sewing. I got all the gold thread done on these panels. Hello, focus. There we go. So I think it's looking super cool so far. I have both the bands done for my arms. So now I'm gonna go ahead and do all the gold threading on the gauntlets, and then whenever you see me again, we are going to be assembling everything finally. Okay, I've got all my pieces cut out, ready to be assembled. So now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take these and we need to put right sides together, which is the side that's gonna be what you see on the outside. So I'm gonna put right sides together, stitch around the edges, and then flip them inside out and then stitch again around the edge just to give everything a good clean press. So we have, this is our right side that you'll see on the outside. I'm going to take my other piece. This is what will be on the arm side of my bracer. So I'm going to place that on top of this. So these are together. That way whenever we flip it, everything will be the correct direction. So I'll go around and get everything lined up. I'll put a couple pins in it. Doesn't really need a whole lot, just because we're not sewing any like crazy curved seams or anything, but still helps to have a few pins to hold everything in place. I've got everything pinned, so I'm gonna go around. I left a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I'm gonna go around, stitch everything 1/2 inch from the edge. I'm gonna leave a little gap in a couple areas just so that I have a place where I can flip it inside out. I'll straighten out all the corners, get them real nice and sharp, and then we'll go around and stitch again over the top, just make a really thin border to close everything off. I'm gonna do the same thing to my other piece, and then I'm gonna give everything a good ironing, and then we'll go around and just stitch around the border to get that hole closed, and also just give it a really nice finish around the edges. Okay, now that I have all of my outside stitching done, it looks really nice. We need to put in our way that we're gonna close this up. So like I said earlier, it's gonna be laced up like a corset. That's backwards. Laced up like a corset on the armband and the gauntlet. So I need to add eyelets all down the sides here. That way I can take my ribbon or string, whatever I'm gonna use, to weave through the holes to crisscross lace it up. So you can see I've already marked out my holes here. I just kind of eyeballed it, and they're about 1 inch apart on either side of here. And then this, I did them about 1.5 inches apart. I didn't want to add as many just because this is not as big of an area. but I think that'll look good. So I have my handy dandy little eyelet maker. I'm just gonna cut little holes where all this is. It's gonna be a little difficult because I gotta cut through my fabric, my interfacing that's on the inside now, and the outside layer. But we'll cut a little hole, and then I have all these gold little eyelets that I think will look really nice with our gold stitching. Okay, my hand hurts so much, but I got it all done. So I think we're done. All I gotta do is lace it up and try everything on together. Okay, what do we think? Personally, I am pretty happy with how everything came out. I love my gauntlets. I think those look really nice. The armbands I'm a little unsure of, but I'm happy I have them. I now have the pattern for them and I can use them if I want to or not. I think once I have the actual dress that I'm planning to wear with this, I think they'll look really good. I think just on my bare arms, I don't know if that looks the best, but I think once I have the dress that I'm planning to wear, and I'll try to include a picture somewhere of what it looks like, I think it'll look really nice. I had a super fun time working on this part and part one where I made my overdress thing. That being said, I'm very happy to move on to new things because this has been like 4 or 5 months of my life working on these things. So definitely ready to, move on to a different project. That being said, I do have some things that are kind of in the planning stage right now coming up. So stay tuned for those. I appreciate you being here, sticking to the end with me if you've made it this far, and I'll see you next time. Bye.